So, a Jewish woman runs into a priest on a Florida beach. No, this is not a setup for a joke. This is part of Merle's true story. And you're going to hear about this pivotal moment when she runs into this person who has just left the priesthood and the story that follows for the 40 years following this story, filled with heartwarming letters back and forth, journaling, and turning journals into a legacy to help other people know that how we live matters and how we live is the legacy that we leave. I'm so glad you are getting to hear this story and so many others in this series of women supporting women. It is possible. We can encourage each other, we can make room at the table, and keep moving forward. Hey, I'm Hillary Baggett, host of Hill Talks Momentum in Midlife. As an occupational therapist turned entrepreneur after 50, I am on a mission to connect, motivate, and inspire women over 40 to know that no matter what is going on in your body, mind, spirit, or business, you can reach for that dream and know you are not alone as we create the Women's Midlife Network. Today, you're going to get to meet my guest, Merle Saferstein. She's an educator, speaker, author, and a pioneer in the field of legacy journaling because she's been journaling for over 48 years. And she has over 380 journals. She used these journals as the basis for her legacy journal. And it's called Living and Leaving My Legacy, Volumes 1 and 2. They've both been released over the last 2 years. I hope you will get as much out of this conversation as I do. She discusses the process of writing, going through journals over 14 years, categorizing, and then taking another 5 years to get them how she wanted. She also moderates what she's willing to share and how vulnerability and can really draw people in to make them feel like they are not alone. And if you know me, women supporting women, I'm all about helping each other out. I especially love her 25 questions of what will her life look like when she was about to leave her job as a Holocaust educator. Enjoy this chat and big welcome. Oh, my heart is just palpitating as I welcome my guest today, Merle Saferstein. Oh, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Hillary. I'm excited to talk to you.
Now, we did speak just a little bit before I pressed record, and I was very upfront and just said, Merle, I'm so intimidated. We could probably talk for hours and weeks, but I'm going to try to rein it in for this time, and I'll just have to invite you back.
Hey, I'm willing to come back. I'm looking forward to have this conversation.
Me too. Your voice is so needed in this time, and you bring so much to not just the people you work with and serve, past and present, but you're really talking about leaving a legacy for generations to come. Before I get to that, I wanted to ask you, can you talk about a pivotal time in your life or a synchronistic moment?
A synchronistic moment for me, probably one of the biggest, was in the end of 1982. I was about to leave a job that I was really not happy with. And I started going to the beach. I live very close to a beach in Miami, Florida. And so I started going to the beach, and every morning I would jog along the shore. And there would be a man who was doing basically the same thing, and we would wave to each other. And then we would both kind of settle in not far from each other. And he was writing and I was writing. And after a few weeks, he stopped to talk to me. And I was at the time, I was I was 38. So I was really pretty much going through an existential crisis, trying to figure out what I was doing, where I was going, what was going to happen. He had just left the priesthood, and he was very spiritual, and he also studied Carl Jung, and he had all kinds of information that I really needed. And so he basically invited me to step along the path and said to me, there will be no turning back, once you start really looking into all of this. And so his name was Tom Osborne. Tom and I became fast friends. He ended up moving away, and he had several temp jobs, and one of them was he went to New York, and he was working as in PR, helping this production called Yours Anne, which was about the Diary of Anne Frank. And it was an operetta that was on off-Broadway. And the person who was directing it said, this man happened to have been the president of the Anne Frank Center, and said to my friend Tom, how would you like to work for us? And so Tom became the executive director of the Anne Frank Center, which was really quite unlikely considering he had been a priest and was Catholic and whatever, but he did. At the same time, someone had found Anne Frank's family photo album in Germany in a chest of drawers and sent it to the Amsterdam Anne Frank house. And they created a photographic exhibition, which was 800 photographs of Anne Frank's family and the surrounding Holocaust. And Tom's job was to take this exhibit and send it around the country. And so at the time I was not working, and Tom said to me, I know that, you journal all the time, and I know Anne Frank speaks to your soul. Would you be willing to do this? And at that point, so this was now over 2 years since I had left my job, and I really needed to work. But at the same time, I also really wanted to do this. And my husband was very generous and said, you know what, you have to do this. And so I ended up bringing the Anne Frank exhibit, the photographic exhibition, to downtown Miami in our library. I had a goal of 50,000 people seeing this exhibition in 6 weeks. And it turned out that we ended up having over 60,000 people. And it was an experience that was incredible, all because I met this man at the beach.
Wow. Wow. I mean, for people on audio, they're not used to me being quiet for that long. On video, if they catch this on YouTube, then they will just get to see my jaw dropping for all of these small hinges that opened. Because why is Anne Frank so near and dear to your heart?
Well, I've been keeping a journal since I was, I started as a young person and then stopped. And then at age 30, I started journaling and have not stopped. So I have 380 journals, and it's a very important part of my life. And I also should say that as a result of doing the exhibition, I ended up becoming a Holocaust educator. So one thing led to the next. And I also should say that my mother, who was a Hebrew school teacher, was only afraid that Tom was trying to convert me. And so, I look back and I just laugh, because not only did he not convert me, but he gave me one of the most meaningful opportunities that I could have ever had.
Oh my goodness, like the emotion that's welling up in me, listening to how these little kind of small steps led to this, but especially for people in faith practices who just assume that someone's always trying to convert them. And I am such a huge advocate for listening to and honoring where people are at, and whether it's their culture or their faith or their family, and listening and being curious and learning. And the value in that, I think, is so beautiful. And I so appreciate you sharing that, so that just because someone's a former Catholic priest does not mean they're trying to turn someone who's Jewish, right?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
And that friendship that was forged, and that really, you became kind of colleagues and supporters. He sounded like he also mentored you. Am I getting that right?
Well, he did mentor me up until the point that I brought the exhibit to Miami, and then I kind of took over. But Tom and I stayed friends and wrote to each other. So we wrote to each other for years and years. He just unfortunately died last October, but we had always talked about writing a book together. And so at some point, Tom saved all my letters and I saved all his letters, and he sent me back all my letters. So I have all of our letters and have started to read them. I don't think I'm going to write a book because I actually think I've told the story in the 2 books that I've just written.
Okay.
But I am really curious to go back and read letters from they start in 1983. And we didn't just write 2-page letters, but I wrote to Tom. I had an ongoing letter to Tom. So our letters were 10 pages, 15 pages, 20 pages, handwritten letters. And he had beautiful calligraphy. So his letters are really like a work of art. And just to have them and to be able to read about the journey, where we were at and what we shared and how we shared. It was pretty incredible.
That sounds so incredible. And I think the art of letter writing is often not done. Sometimes the messages these days are a text of a few words. Sometimes people don't take time to write a full email. And the beauty of letters, I'm with you. I started journaling when I was a little girl, and I also kept my journals. And I also am a big letter writer, or at least I used to be. And there's such value in communicating what's in our heart and what's happening in our lives. I love how you have done that. So, you kind of explained a little bit of how you became the legacy educator. And, but I don't know if there was the why behind that. So,
So
could you
it was,
share?
yeah, so it was the Holocaust educator that I was. Right. So the Holocaust, I didn't really know that much about it, but when I started out, I actually started as a volunteer because I had done a lot of student programming around the exhibit. And the head of the Holocaust Center had come and had seen some of our programming and wanted to do student programming and asked me if I would come and volunteer. So I did. And then 2 weeks after I got there, the secretary quit. And they asked me if I would be the secretary. And I said, I will at that point, we were desperate for me to work. Although I did not really want to be the secretary. That was not really what I wanted to do with my life. But I did take the job, and I said I will take it for 3 months, and then if I'm not in the education department, I need to move on. And they had hired someone with her PhD who was about to start. She had, she was finishing her PhD and then coming to Miami, and so I started and worked there. The woman, unfortunately, was a disaster. Unfortunately for her, and my boss saw that I could do this. And so the president at the time was also the president of one of the universities and he took me to breakfast and he grilled me for about 3 hours. And he said, you can do this. And I only had an elementary education degree. So, I was really not qualified in terms of educationally to do this. But it was more administration than it was the background. And so they hired me and I became the director of educational outreach and then stayed there for 26 years. So all because I met Tom at the beach.
Wow. Wow. Well, something that really stood out to me, and I think it's a theme that many of us women struggle with, of not feeling qualified. Nowadays, some people will call it imposter syndrome or, oh, can I really do this? And I think we as women often sell ourselves short on all the experiences that we have in life that lead us to this moment and how we can either the moment of lift, like Melinda French Gates has written, or Sheryl Sandberg with her lean in, and ways that we are supporting each other and how to make it possible. Do you have a little bit of advice for someone who is saying, I'm not qualified to do this?
It's a tough one because I've been there. I guess my best advice would be to just believe in yourself. Look in the mirror and believe in yourself, and trust that if you're in that position, there's a reason why you're there. And so stick with it and just go for it.
Absolutely. Looking ourselves in the mirror, saying, I can do this, and go for it.
And do
right?
it. And do it.
And do it. Oh my goodness. That is so encouraging, because you are not 10 years old and you are not 20 years old, and we don't have to discuss age necessarily.
I have no problem talking age.
Would you like to share how old you are?
I'm 78, almost 79.
Awesome. And I find there is such value in having conversations with women across all ages, because we can learn so much from the wisdom. And I appreciate and respect that you are comfortable with your age, because depending on how someone was raised, they will never discuss their age. But I'm 53 and happy to be still living and kicking.
I never understood why women wouldn't mention their age. I just actually met someone last week who's exactly my age, but she would not tell me her age. And it's just, eventually it kind of came out. But I just looked at her like, really? Just like sharing recipes. I don't understand why people won't do that either. It's like, why not? Why not pass it along?
Pass it on. I really do like that. Oh my goodness. I've never understood that either. I'm like, it's just an age, you might be able to tell by wrinkles or sunspots or color of hair or not. Age doesn't define us. Just like I like to say, hair color doesn't define us, but that's just me.
I had an aunt. My mother had 5 sisters, and one of her sisters did not tell her daughter her age. And I remember being a teenager and going with another cousin of mine who was the same age. And this other cousin was a little younger. And we were laying in bed, the 3 of us talking, and we were talking about the age, what place in the family her mother was. And her mother had actually told her she was further down in the family. And my cousin Linda and I looked at her and said, no way, your mother is up there. And I remember thinking, that's just so crazy to know.
Right. Right. I think the messages for, centuries have definitely put kind of suppressed women to think that age is something to be ashamed of and to hide it, but it's just a number.
It is. It is just a number.
Oh, I love it. Well, I so appreciate that you were kind of correcting being a Holocaust educator, but then shifting to being a legacy educator, because your heart is to help people leave a legacy for future generations. And that makes my soul sing. So that's why I'm just so excited to talk about this next.
What happened was, after 26 years, I realized that it was really time for me to move on, that I had accomplished a lot, and that I felt that there were still other things I wanted to do. And so for the last year of my work at the Holocaust Center, I posed about 25 questions to myself. What would my life look like when I'm no longer here doing this? And throughout the year, I answered those questions. And I knew that there were certain things I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to speak. I knew I wanted to teach. I knew I wanted to volunteer. And I knew I wanted to write a book. And so throughout the year, I just started putting the pieces together to figure out what that was going to look like when I walked out the door of the Holocaust Center. And one of the things that was the hardest for me was, what will I teach? Because I knew I wasn't willing to go back into elementary school education teaching like I had done early on in my career, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And journaling one day in the middle of the year, the word legacy came down. So my job at the Holocaust Center was really to help the survivors pass along their legacy of remembrance. That was my job. And I started writing, oh, I wonder if there's something to this. I wonder if there's a market. I wonder if people would be interested in looking at their legacy. And what does that mean? And so by the end of the year, I had decided that I would teach a class, and I called it Living and Leaving Your Legacy. And when I walked out the door, my first goal was to write this book that I had been wanting to write for 25 years, and it was about the beach, a hotel at the beach where Tom and I had actually met, a very interesting hotel that was built in 1926. And it had a really interesting history, including during the war, the Navy took it over to be an indoctrination and training center. And when my husband and I moved to Florida with our children, it was a Florida Bible college. So it was a born again Bible college. And the students were proselytizing as we were playing at the beach with our kids. And then it became an upscale hotel, condo. So it had a great history. And I decided that was the book I wanted to write. And it was just at the time when I took my job at the Holocaust Center. And with the family and whatever, I just couldn't do it. So right out the door, I wrote the book and I developed the class. And I began to look at the different volunteer opportunities. And that's where I've been the last 11 years.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think you've just like created a pathway. And I'm like, Merle, can I just get on that pathway? I would like to speak and teach and volunteer and write. And, you're a trailblazer in that of it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter your faith background. It doesn't matter your age. It's never too late to start something new, because you became an author after the age of 50. Am I correct?
Yeah. So my book was published in 2012. I was 68 when my first book was published.
Okay.
And then just last year and this year, I published 2 more books. So, and one of the things, when you say about speaking, what I realized is my book was the vehicle for me to get out and speak. And that's really how that happened.
Okay. Wow. Well, and I think so often the messages we get, and midlife is defined as ages 40 to 60, just for terms of psychology. And in fact, it was Carl Jung that defined some of the stages that we go through in midlife, and finding our true voice, deciding what gives us real meaning and purpose. And I think once kind of our eyes are awakened of that, there might be more to my life than I've imagined. And just because I can't imagine finishing the book or getting it on the bookshelf doesn't mean it's not possible. And there's not an expiration date for our dreams.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
I look at some of my friends who are my age and I see what they're doing with their lives. And some are really involved and active and others not. But those who have a purpose and who have found meaning in their life are leading such a rich life. And those who just are happy playing canasta and whatever else they do, they're happy too, and it's not for me to judge. I just know that for me, I need to have meaning in my life or it doesn't work.
that is so true, that for some people, they are finding that satisfaction at what they're doing. But there are those of us that are just driven to find that meaning and purpose that's kind of greater than ourselves, to leave that legacy, right?
Right, absolutely. And what I've learned about legacy is that how you live your legacy becomes your life. So the truth is that, no, I said that wrong. How you live your life becomes your legacy.
There we go.
I knew that didn't sound right. So basically, we set an example. People watch us and learn from us, and it's not necessarily what we say, but it's how we act and what we do. And I think that's really important to know.
Absolutely. You give me so much to think about. But I know I wanted to focus on your living and leaving my legacy, because you've got 2 volumes and the second one just came out. Was it just this year?
Yes, it came out in June of this year. Yeah. So how I wrote the book or why I wrote them.
Well, exactly what led you? We'll start with volume 1 because it's been a few years, and then we'll segue into volume 2. How about that?
Okay. Well, actually, it all comes together. So what happened was in about year 2000, I had 2 children and realized I always thought that I was going to leave my journals to them. And at that point, I had about 340 journals and realized that I really couldn't leave my journals to my children because I wrote them for myself. And there were things in there for my eyes only and not for my children. And so I started thinking, well, what can I do? Um, and also hoped that in some way there would be something in my journals that was worth sharing. But I didn't know because I really hadn't read. I had read some at one point, but I knew that I needed to go back and started reading them. And so what I did was I chose different topics and eventually ended up with 70 different topics, and and eventually ended up working from 1970. My journals go from 1974 to 2016 that I used to write these 2 books. And so it took me 14 years to read the journals and take excerpts according to all the different subjects. And then when I finished that, so I finished that in 2016, I then spent 5 years going through my journal, through the excerpts. So some of the excerpts were anywhere from 75 pages to 450 pages. So, for example, my husband and I have been married 56 years. So that topic is like 450 pages, or the topic on parenting is also really long. So I have all kinds of different topics and they just differed in length. But I had to decide which ones I was willing to share. So first I did that. And then once I eliminated, I realized I was going to have 22 topics, 11 topics in each book. And I was planning to publish them both together as a collection. And it was actually my publisher who said to me, no, publish one and then publish the second one. So the first one I published in June of 22, and then the second one in June of 23. But I had worked on the project as an entire project so that it wasn't just, that I was starting with volume 2 when I finished volume 1. It was well underway. And it took me 5 years to go through and eliminate the pages and just get down to the real essence of what it was I wanted to share. And the truth is that I was not sharing it all because I was very vulnerable and said, I don't know that I want to put some of this out there. And it was a friend of mine who's a psychologist who said, Merle, it's really important to share all of it. People are going to relate to the difficult times, not to all the great things. If it's all fluff, it's not going to work. And so I went back to some of the topics and started pulling some of the more difficult pieces and really had a lot of self-doubt. A lot of it was, it became not just for my children, but I said, oh, you know what, I'm going to share this with the world. And then it was like, why would anyone want to read this? What does it mean? And actually what ended up happening is that the first volume has more of my earlier career life, even though the excerpts go from 74 to 2016. It's marriage and parenting and on being a woman. So there's a lot about the women's movement because I was a feminist early on. And it goes back to all those things. It goes back to when we didn't have a name for premenstrual syndrome. When I remember sitting on the couch watching the news, and some news commentators said, we've just come up with a name. And I turned to my husband and said, it's about time that someone started acknowledging what we've been going through all our lives. And so the second volume is, I think, a much more serious volume. It's on relationships, on death and dying, on the Holocaust survivors. I have a chapter of 48 vignettes of Holocaust survivors that I worked with. and it's on legacy. And then at the end of the legacy chapter, I've written just different legacy projects someone can do. Legacy projects we can do with children who have lost loved ones, how to write an ethical will. So they're just different legacy things. Plus, at the end of each chapter, I have journal prompts based on whatever the chapter is, so that a person could read them and reflect on their own thoughts. One of the reasons I wrote these books for two reasons. One, to help people understand the benefits of journaling. And the second, to look at my life, not because it's my life, but to look at my life as a mirror into one's own life. And so the journal prompts help the reader do that. They help the reader look at, what I'm saying about marriage, or what I'm saying about a relationship, or what I'm saying about death and dying, and look at their own lives and what they're thinking and feeling.
Oh my goodness. Well, now I can't wait to go and get it, because one, to read the rich stories. And even before we pressed record and you were telling me a little bit about some of the Holocaust survivor stories, and I was already crying, and I said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm okay crying in front of people. I've done enough therapy work to make it a positive experience." And I think journal prompts can be a game changer for people, because so often people look at a blank page or a blank screen and think, what am I going to write? And having that little prompt can make all the difference to help someone move forward, right?
Absolutely. And when people say I have no idea what to write, I always say, start with right now. Right now I'm feeling, or right now I'm thinking. And it's as simple as that. And once we put our pens to paper, the rest is history. Our pens flow.
Well, I was going to ask you, what is your preferred method of writing? Are you a pen and paper? Are you a typer? Are you a dictator?
I am definitely a pen and paper. I wrote with a fountain pen that I've been writing with for years and years. I used to have all different color inks. For a while, I was on a peacock blue ink. So I have many early journals in peacock blue. Now I write with black. All my journals are black, handwritten, every page filled.
Oh my goodness. That is just amazing to listen to your process, the seeds, the pivotal moments, the writing, and then also kind of offering up as your own legacy how to write your own legacy story, which is really, you've modeled the how and now showing someone else how they can make it happen for them.
That's my goal. That's my goal, to help people look at their own lives and live the best life they can live.
Look at your life and live the best life you can. Amazing. Well, I'll be sure to drop links in the show notes of how you can find Merle. And her name rhymes with girl, and she's great about telling you that, because, honoring how we say someone's name can matter, and it can be meaningful, and caring enough to want to say a name correctly is great. Well, Merle Saferstein, I am so grateful for your time, for the legacy that you are still living. And I know it will go beyond the volumes 1 and 2 that you've already shared with the world. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Hillary. I really appreciate this conversation.
I loved it. Wow. Now that was a great conversation with an amazing woman. There was so much to take in. What really stood out to me was, for those of us that feel like we're not qualified, hey, look at yourself in the mirror and say, you can do this. I believe in you. And then go and do that thing. And you don't have to do it alone. There are other people who are willing to walk the path with you. Oh my goodness. I love hearing her story of meeting a retired priest on the beach, and how that pivotal moment changed the trajectory of her entire life, becoming a legacy educator after she became a Holocaust educator. I mean, and then the passion to write books to leave a legacy. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What stood out for you? What kind of legacy are you thinking of leaving when you're no longer here? And if you're not sure, just look back on the life you've been living, because that will be your legacy. If there's something you want to shift, do differently, now is the time, because it's never too late, no matter who you are. Well, I will leave details in the show notes of how you can buy her book on leaving a legacy and living and leaving my legacy, volumes 1 and 2 with Merle Saferstein. Thanks so much for tuning in. All right, here's where I need your help. I want you to help me let women entrepreneurs and business owners who are over 50 know that there is a place where they can come to connect, learn, and get inspired at the Women's Midlife Network. You can share this episode with them today. Whether you're clicking those 3 dots to share the episode or following that little box with the arrow up. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for listening. If you've made it this far, I appreciate you being an essential part of the Women's Midlife Network. We're connecting women. We're sharing stories and inspiring change. And not just for now, but for decades to come. I am so thankful for you, and I always hope you feel the love. Until next time, this is Hillary Baggett with Hill Talks Podcast. Let's move forward in midlife.